Well, hi everybody, it's Jackie at Stitch House. Been a while since I've done anything like this, but I think Jessica has decided that she better get me to do some more videos while I still remember things. Maybe because I have a birthday coming up next month and it's clicked with her that she's getting older and older. So at any rate, we're gonna try this and see how it goes, and we'll see if she lets me do another one after this, okay? So I'm gonna be talking about the Bernina Walking Foot. It's a 3-sole walking foot. This is the box that it comes in. So it is the Bernina Foot of the Month, the accessory of the month, and that means that you can buy it this month through January at 25% off. So there's our box. Now this is my walking foot, and I want to show you what comes with the walking foot. This is actually the walking foot itself right there. All right, and then you also have actually 3 different soles that come with it. This is the open front sole. This is the stitch in the ditch foot, or sole I should say. And then this is the 3rd sole, and it is, as opposed to this open front one, this one has a little bar that will be in front of the needle holding the fabric down for you. So right here is where the needle goes in. And then in front of that, like most presser feet have, there is a bar to hold the fabric down. Now, why do you want 3 different soles? Bernina says that the one with the bar in front is designed just for regular sewing. And the one that's open in front is designed for quilting. We'll talk a little more about that in just a minute. And then this stitch in the ditch foot is just exactly for that, stitching in the ditch, or if you want to stitch close to a ditch, you use the guide on this foot and needle positions. So let's come back a minute and look at the all-purpose foot. It has some neat features that I think you need to know about. I have used a black pin to put a black mark in a groove that's right here, and that groove sits in front of the needle, so you can always tell where the center of your stitch is and where the needle is going to follow with that little groove right there. Right here, and I didn't mark this one, but right at the front of that piece that holds the fabric down is a 1/4 inch from the needle. So if you are needing to turn a corner, like sewing binding on, when the front of your quilt, the corner of your quilt reaches that edge, it's time to turn the corner. Can you see that, or is that too much glare? I tried to put a little black mark here and here. Those are actually grooves, and those marks or grooves are a 1/4 inch from the needle. So if you are sewing 1/4 inch seams, you've got those marks to guide you. And then here on each side of the foot, you have an indentation, a groove, and I've marked it again in black, and that one lines up with the needle. So if you're trying to align your fabric with the needle, then you've got that mark on each side. So be sure that you check those and that you know you have them on your machine, because they will aid you as you use a walking foot. Over here on the open front foot, you have the mark on the side that aligns with your needle, and that's on both sides. But you're not going to have the, because there's no bar across here, you're not going to have a center mark. And as far as the 1/4 inch, I guess that would be on the inside of these 2 toes, the right and the left toe. But as I said, this foot, Bernina says, is for quilting. And I can tell you that if you want to have the wonkiest, most irregular straight stitch that your machine will sew, and it doesn't matter what brand it is, but if you don't want a really good straight stitch, use an open front foot. And there's a lot of open front feet on the market, not just this one for the walking foot. But when you don't have anything holding the fabric in front of the presser foot, your straight stitch is not going to be as nice as it will be when there's a little bar in front of the needle that holds the fabric down. I do think a nice advantage to using an open front foot is if you're using decorative stitches, you can see the decorative stitches sew as you go, and that's kind of entertaining, but you're also asking for some trouble. And I'm going to tell you about another problem that you could have with this with the open front one, which is right here. And I have been trying to think of this term at least a week, and I just can't find it. And Google has no idea what I'm talking about. But you know, when your needle goes down in the fabric, and then when the needle starts up out of the fabric, sometimes the fabric sticks to the needle and pulls the fabric up. The needle pulls the fabric up, and that can actually throw off your timing on the machine, not on a permanent basis, but just for that one stitch. You run the risk, I feel, of having that problem of skipping stitches if you don't have the foot that has the bar in front of it. I know Bernina calls it the quilting foot, but my recommendation is that you use the closed front foot. The other sole that comes with it is this one that we mentioned just briefly a minute ago, and this is the one for stitching in the ditch with the nice guide built onto it. Let's say this is the ditch of my fabric. I could run that in the ditch of the fabric, and I could be assured that my stitching will be right in that ditch. As I was researching the machine, I have to tell you that one of the articles I read in Bernina's blog, weallsew.com, said not to press your seams open if you're going to stitch in the ditch, that it weakens the seam if you press it open and then stitch in the ditch. And then another article said, always press your seams open when you stitch in the ditch. So you decide which you want to do. I know that I can find the ditch much easier if the seam is pressed open. Never thought about it weakening the seam. We'll see. Let us know what you think about that. By the way, if you do have some feelings about pressing the seam open or not pressing the seam open for stitching in the ditch, make a comment and let us see what you think about it. And when I mentioned that little problem with the fabric coming up with a needle, if you know that term, put it in a comment, please. I'm telling you, none of the search engines could help me with that one. Now, how do you change out a foot? How do you change out the sole? So on one side of the actual walking foot, you'll find a screw right here. And with the walking foot, you get one of the little Bernina screwdrivers. Alyssa's going to insert a picture here in the video showing how to do this, but they are holding this walking foot up. I would lay it on a flat surface and use your screwdriver, and oh, that's tight. That was just a half a turn, another half a turn, another half a turn, another half turn, and eventually this black arm and this black arm that are holding the sole on will open up so that you can remove the sole. Pretty simple, huh? These were the arms that were holding the foot on. And if you look inside those arms, and you're probably going to have trouble seeing that here, but there are two little holes on one side. That's actually on the left side. And on the right side, there's one. It's actually a nub, not holes. The holes are in the actual foot. Okay, so here's your foot. And on one side, you see the two holes. And on the other side, you see one hole. So what you can do is align the left side that has the two holes, get the nubs on the black arms in the two holes. All right, I think that's where we need it. Lay the walking foot on its side so this screw is up towards you, and then start tightening it up. And you'll find that this side, the one that you didn't worry so much about positioning in its hole, will just kind of fall into place. I don't know if y'all can hear, but every time I go, huh, Alyssa goes, huh. Alyssa is filming, y'all. Now, I might back up just a minute and let's talk about dual feed versus a walking foot, because so many of our machines, our Bernina machines, now have dual feed. And dual feed works kind of like a walking foot, but let's talk about the difference. When you're sewing, let's say that you have two pieces of fabric that you're going to sew together. When you put that fabric under your presser foot, they're probably both cut to the same length, but the feed dogs are only moving the bottom layer of fabric. The top layer is just along for the ride. And sometimes it rides nicely, and sometimes the top layer doesn't ride so nicely. And in fact, it starts scooting forward, and when you come to the end of your seam, you might find that the top layer is sticking out 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch past the bottom layer because it wasn't going to ride as nicely as you hoped it would. Now, with a dual feed system, and I'm going to bring the dual feed system down here on this machine. This is the dual feed, and it has these little ridges right here, and they align with that center part of the feed dog. So when you have these same two layers of fabric, this is going to grab the top layer and help it to feed more evenly with the bottom layer, I should say. So that's how dual feed works. However, there are times when dual feed is not enough to make those layers stay positioned properly. And one of the times is when you add a layer of batting between the two layers of fabric. And in that case, if it is anything from a lap size quilt on up, and you have to sew from one end of the quilt to the other, it's very unlikely that dual feed will be enough help on that top layer of fabric. And it's simply because that layer of batting is under there. So what do? That's when you need your walking foot. The walking foot has actually 3 little pieces of, is it a rubber? I don't know, but it kind of sticks to the fabric, the top layer of fabric. And these pieces here, here, and here align with the 3 sections of the feed dog. So if that is helping to feed on top and the feed dogs are doing their usual duty underneath, then you don't have the fabric, the top layer of fabric, pushing forward. Now that's quilting, but there's more uses for a walking foot than just for quilting. If you are doing napped fabrics, minky, any kind of the plush fabrics, velveteen, double-sided fleece, the walking foot is going to do more for you to keep that top layer even than the dual feed would. Now, my preference is to use the dual feed whenever I can, mainly because the foot that I'm going to use is much smaller than my walking foot. And certainly it's easier to put on the machine than the walking foot. We'll look at how to put the walking foot on in just a minute. So I always cut some samples of the fabric that I'm going to be sewing. And by the way, those need to be cut in the direction that you're going to be sewing them. And if it's both directions, you better cut some crossways and lengthwise. Be sure they're at least 12 inches long, 2 layers, and then try your dual feed and see if that will take care of that top layer of fabric feeding evenly. If it doesn't, it's time to get your walking foot out. I like the dual feed mechanism on the Bernina so much that I have no hesitation in recommending that if the foot you want to add to your collection is available as a dual feed foot, buy it. It really makes a difference in your sewing, but there will be times when a walking foot does even more for you. I use my walking foot for attaching binding because, again, you've got layers of batting, you've got several layers of fabric, and so a walking foot is really nice there. Oh, I wanted to show you this. This is a walking foot that I had at home. This is a box that a walking foot came in, and the walking foot is out of it. This is it. So this one is quite ancient. It's one of the first walking feet that came out for Bernina, and it only came with 2 soles. So it came with the closed front sole and the open sole. If this is the walking foot that you have, and it still fits the current model of Bernina that you're sewing on, you can add the stitch and the ditch foot to it. It's available separately. And speaking of adding, Bernina also has a red walking foot. So this white part is red. So I would think that anybody who had Bernina red chair would probably want to have a Bernina red walking foot too. You can't be buried with your machine, it's too big, and certainly not with the chair, But your red walking foot could go with you, don't you think? Yeah. Loyal Bernina owners, right? If you have questions that I haven't covered, put them in the comments. I will try to find answers if I don't know them. And if I can't find an answer, I'll make something up. That was a joke.
When the fabric gets stuck to the needle.
Yeah, I want to know what that is, y'all. Do you know what it is, Janet? When the fabric sticks to the needle, and as the needle comes out of the fabric goes with it. And it compresses that loop of thread that's on the back of the needle, so it skips the stitch. And there's a word for it. I always know that word. Okay, I think that's all I know today.
Amazing. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Goodbye.
Bye.